Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Anokhi Life's weekly radio talk show, Anokhi Uncensored, where we have the conversations that need to be had that affect our community regionally, nationally, and internationally. I'm your host this week, Raj Girn, and I'm pleased to introduce two very interesting guests today, the founders of SRC Partners or Sandhya Rohi Culture Partners, Sandhya Jain-Patel and Rohi Mirza Pandya. Welcome to the show, ladies. I'm so excited to have this really important conversation with both of you.
We are so excited to be here. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So what I'd like to do first, ladies, is I want to be able to share a little bit about your company and just let our audience know, a little bit about kind of what you're all about. And then we'll kind of really deep dive into why you decided to start this company and why now. So if that's good with you, I'm just going to go right into it. So folks, SRC Partners launched this year as a cultural advisory firm with expertise, contacts, and cultural sensitivity to support the storytelling instincts of their clients. They believe that collaboration between creatives and cultural producers results in more compelling narratives. Their focused market is the entertainment sector, and they provide a comprehensive DEI plan for film, TV, theater, and online projects, and help at any point of the development and production process. And I cannot wait to sink my teeth into just this very relevant and important discussion that we need to have about getting it right, about getting the storytelling process right, especially in today's climate. And we'll definitely go into that a little bit more deeply. But to set the scene a little bit about why you both decided to co-found this company, I want to kind of look back a little bit at kind of where you both come from culturally as well as professionally. Rohi, do you want to kind of kick it off with that as being our starting point?
Sure, definitely. Raj, again, thank you for having us. I mean, we've known each other for a number of years. Such
decades,
a long time,
actually.
And like decades.
Dare we say?
Yeah, dare we say? I mean, like it's been amazing, working with you on the PR side of films, and that's where my background comes from. It's been 20 plus years. I know it really dates us when we say that. It's like, oh my goodness, 20 plus years. But it really has been that.
It has.
And
we've seen a lot of change in that, obviously, Rohi, right? We've seen a lot of change in kind of the pioneering years of when we started out. And I know that that's going to be a part of some of the discussion we have. And and I know it's probably, one of the reasons why you guys decided to kind of do this, because you've seen quite the trajectory change that's been happening in society and culture and a lot of that. So let's go back to, where you kind of started. I know it was the PR game 20 years ago.
Yes. 20 years ago. And the first film we worked on was Monsoon Wedding, Mary Nier's film. And since then we worked on almost every one of her films, and as well as like Grinder Chadha's and Deepa Mehta's. We've worked on many, many films over the years. Hundreds on the Bollywood and Hollywood side. So we've seen a lot of films. And, I think that for us, we think representation really matters. And I've always thought that. I have a background as well in theater in New York City. I had a theater company with my sister 20 years ago, De Subpoena, and we did these shows 7-Eleven. And we always believed that our representation, putting Asian and South Asian folks on stage was really important. Hearing women's voices was really important.
And I remember that. I remember that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, you came to quite a few of those shows, I feel like, when you were in the city.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that like you've known me and like what I've always stood for and what's been important to me. So and like I've known Sandhya for that long as well. Like we've been wanting to work together for a real long time now. And we have skill sets that really complement each other. So we're very excited to start SRC Partners together.
Absolutely. And do you want to talk maybe, Rohi, a little bit about the wheelhouse of expertise that you bring to the table before we move into Sandhya?
Sure. So I think that my wheelhouse is that I have a DEI certification. I've worked in the DEI field now for 8 years as official capacity, where now that they call it DEI.
Yes.
But I feel like even back 20 years ago, what I was doing, I feel like could come under that umbrella.
Yes.
So
100%.
I think that, I think that that's the background that I bring to the table, as well as just the business background. And I think that being on the PR side of things, I got to see a lot of things where you could correct earlier instead of having the finished project at the end. There's a lot of things that SRC can bring to the table where you could correct things that might have not been a problem, where we would have to spin
Right,
a project
of course.
in order to, and make it sound good.
Absolutely. And just for those who aren't initiated, can you just tell them what DEI is?
DEI. Sandhya has a really great snippet for it. I will give you a little bit, but I want Sandhya to definitely chime in with how she explains it, because I feel like it's very interesting that this piece that she's read. But DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And diversity, in a nutshell, is pretty much somebody's unique and individuality. Like it could be race, gender, disabilities. It just makes you who you are. And then equity is when you bring everybody to the table. Everybody has the same playing field. You level the playing field. It might have to give somebody a little bit more to get to that level and the same playing field. And then inclusion is when that person feels like they're an insider. They're a part of the project. They're included in everything. So, I mean, that's in a nutshell. And I think Sandhya has a great way of explaining it.
And, and I want to get into that like a little bit later on, where we kind of really deep dive what these terms mean. But Sandhya, let's go to you now. I want to ask you the same question. Like, let's talk a little bit about your cultural background and, what you bring to the table with SRC Partners, professionally speaking.
Sure. So I, like Rohi, have been in the theater, arts, and culture space in New York City for the last 20 years, working on both performing and fine art side. So previously, I was the head of the Indian Islamic and Southeast Asian Sorry, I'm going to start this answer again.
And you know what? Just give it a second. What we'll do is we'll cut that out. So my question is going to go to your answer. So just take a moment and then.
Okay. Thanks for having us, Raj. So as Rohi was saying, I've also been in the art space here in New York City for the last 20 years, both in the performing side as well as the cultural side, fine art side. I was previously the head of the Indian, Himalayan, and Southeast Asian department at Christie's. And I got to travel the world and see exhibits on all sorts of art, not just from South and Southeast Asia, but also from Vietnam, Cambodia, again, different parts of Southeast Asia that we don't necessarily see represented at this point in media,
right.
But also cross-referencing that with all of Europe, most of America, actually also East Asia, so China, Japan, Korea. The arts is such a great venue for what we like to talk about when we talk about DEI and also intersectionality, where somebody can be not just of one identity, but several identities, and how those all come together to create an accurate and nuanced representation of a lived experience.
Right.
So when Rohi was doing 7-Eleven, I was also doing some theater and plays and movies. I was in front of and behind the camera doing this kind of work for example, a movie like Accidental Husband with Uma Thurman, Colin Firth, Sarita Chaudhry, and Isabella Rossellini. I got to get my makeup done next to her, which was much fun.
That's a great moment. What a fascinating actress she is, what a fascinating personality she is, right?
Yeah.
Isabella. Yeah.
She's incredible and like the nicest person. And I just remember being in this trailer and she and Sarita are having conversations about like their children going to UN schools. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to them about their school children. That's amazing. But of course, not really. I was just listening. But for that production, I was brought in as a choreographer, and it just quickly became apparent that there was so much that needed to be done in terms of casting, costumes, set design, script analysis. At one point, we had the entire crew learning the Gayatri Mantra because we had to make booklets for a particular scene that they were showing in the movie. It was just, and it was such a great experience. I mean, having a director like Griffin Dunn, who also at that time was at the forefront of recognizing that representation had to be nuanced and accurate, was a real gift. And it just opened my eyes to the fact that, you know, as much as I love to sing and dance and do a little bit of acting, what I really wanted to do was make sure, just as I did at Christie's, that the education of our cultures, our combined cultures, is accurate.
Right.
So when Ruhi was doing 7-Eleven, she actually asked me to choreograph a piece for one of her plays. And I just enjoyed the process so much. And she and Rahana have been so far ahead of their time when it comes to this kind of work. And I'm just so excited to have been along for the ride for so many years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what was that moment where you both kind of came together? Like, was it a conversation? Was it like, what happened where you guys said, okay, we are doing this together?
So, you know, I have been doing this work and wanting to do this work more intensely for the last 15 years. I've worked in a couple of different movies, not just Accidental Husband, but scenes and casting and costumes and all of that through the years. And always as a side project, you know, it was never one of those things where everybody needs like a brown South Asian consultant on scene. So it was just whenever I got the opportunity to do it. But more and more the last couple of years, I started thinking to myself, like, you know, this is really something that I want to do. I want to go forth and help open people's eyes, because we were seeing all sorts of representation in the media. I mean, you know, Ruhi can talk about like the misrepresentation of Muslims always as terrorists, for example. And, you know, like South Asians always have to be colorful. You know, they can't have like a plain wedding. They have to have like every single rainbow. There just seems so many stereotypes that were just getting trite, getting old. So Ruhi and I started talking about this last year, and you know, well before the pandemic, well before Black Lives Matter and all of that, we've been thinking about this for a while and started working on it at the beginning of this year, January, February. And just with all of the events of 2020, it's really become clear to us that we're on the right path.
Absolutely. Let me ask you just off the back of what you just said there, what do you see going on in society, in business, in entertainment, in storytelling that made SRC a necessity project for you guys to partner up in? I mean, Ruhi, do you want to start off by telling us that a little bit? Because I know like a lot of your history. I know that this is work that you've been doing literally from the beginning, even though it didn't have a name and a title. But, you know, what is it that's going on in society, you know, business, and just the whole idea and concept behind being able to tell relevant and correct stories that you felt that this is something you needed to do right now?
I think that, like, for me, like you said, I've always believed in this. This has been a passion of mine.
Yes.
But now I'm finally seeing people buying in. The buy-in is so important. I feel like I see everybody saying DEI. There's companies where now there's actual departments for it. And so I feel like the change is coming. There is a shift. And, you know, for us to create the term cultural producer and making that an industry standard is so important. It's just like having a line producer on your set. This is going to be a necessity. You don't just put a project together without having a complete DEI plan in place, especially if there's cultural sensitivity that needs to be happening in each project. I just feel like, and I think Sandhya agrees, that we just cannot have that anymore. We're not in a space for that anymore. No one's going to accept that anymore. And that we're at a, you know, I think we're really at that point where things are gonna shift. And I think it's exciting. It's actually really exciting. I've been seeing lots of conversations around this, and I'm very happy and excited about it.
Absolutely. I mean, you said something really poignant. And for anyone that's just, tuning in right now, guys, I am in conversation with the co-founders of SRC Partners. And basically what they do is they offer a heavy lifting service to be able to tell the correct stories when it comes to kind of cultural appropriation, regardless of what that culture may be. In a nutshell, that's kind of, what they do, but we're going to go deeper and delve into some of the service that they offer. It's interesting that you just said something quite poignant there, Ruhi, cultural producer. I mean, this is something that you think should have always been in place, right? Like if you're going to tell a story about anything, culture somehow plays in the mix on some capacity, but it's never existed. Now, this is something that you guys are, bringing to the table with SRC Partners. I'm very excited to see kind of what will happen with that. Sandhya, let me ask you, what does the company, actually do? Like, let's for those who have no idea about, the film business, or even have touched upon anything that's to do with appropriating anything to do with culture, what do they need to know about what you guys offer? Because there's a lot of companies out there on many levels in the entertainment business, and with, streaming, global, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of change going on. Technology has literally changed the way that we consume content, and we also provide content. So let's talk a little bit about what the services are that you guys provide under the umbrella of SRC Partners.
Thank you. So as a cultural producer, we are able to look at a project from conception, development, pre-production, production, post-production, which includes editing and any other cleanup that has to happen, as well as positioning and marketing. So for example,
I love that you said cleanup. I love that you said that, you get bought in when people botch it up, and you guys have to come in and just clean that mess up. So that on the PR side, like Ruhi said earlier, they're not trying to figure out how to kind of, solve just this big Mack truck coming towards everybody, right?
Right. and that's the point, is that we can come in at any stage in the process. Obviously, involving us earlier in the process will ensure that the DEI plan that we help to create will stay true throughout the entire process.
Right.
I think it's important to stress that a creative doesn't have to know everything. Nobody can know everything, and nobody can know what they don't know.
Right.
But that's why we're here, right? We provide the research, we provide the partners that can come in and say, this speaks to my authentic lived experience. And I just want to tell you that from my point of view, this is how this makes me feel. This concept, this production, this costume, this set design, whatever it may be. If it's just messaging, in a private business, how does that get received by me as a person in this particular space? And so we're there to ensure that we are an advocate for success of the project, whether that is the creative needing help and figuring out how to make this go really well, whether that's the producers saying, hey, look, you guys, you might need to spend a little more money here, or actually you don't need to spend that kind of money on this kind of set. We can do it in a much simpler way that still is respectful of the cultural sensitivities that you're trying to pay attention to. And we see this, with so many different entertainment companies, media and entertainment companies, having to revisit their libraries and either decide if they're going to pull material because it's just far too offensive, or have some sort of a disclaimer or something in front that says, we recognize that these are outdated representations of these types of people, and we're very respectful of that now, et cetera, for more information, blah, blah, blah.
Didn't Netflix pull Gone with the Wind?
I think they did, yeah.
Right?
I know, which is...
Go on. I think they put a disclaimer in front of that one too.
Okay.
Like they pulled it for a minute and then they put some sort of disclaimer. Yeah. So I think that, I think a lot of companies now have to take a hard look at their libraries, as well as, I think that producers have to take a hard look at what they're putting together and how they're putting their projects together.
Right.
That's the most important thing. And like Sandhya said, that we're advocates, we're a third party, that you're can be in the room, and doesn't really have to be, you could advocate for the writer, you could advocate for the producer, we're not really for one or the other. I know that, like, we know lots of writers that are in writers' rooms because they're whatever ethnicity, and it's up to them to be they put the burden on that one writer to say everything about, I don't know, being South Asian, being Latino, being just whatever, insert whoever you are, being a woman. you know, like they put everything on the writer. And I think somebody like SRC Partners can go in there and advocate for that writer, or for what vision they want to tell, without it all just being on them to tell that vision.
Right. You know, it's another point that you just brought up that I feel is very interesting and for people to need to know is this is not just about being, you know, culturally appropriate to the South Asian community. I mean, this is about cultural appropriation, you know, across the board, right? You guys actually can be bought into any project,
correct,
where culture is concerned. Can we talk a little bit about that for people who may think that just because you're two South Asian, you know, founders of this company, that you're only here to service that culture? This whole concept and idea about pop culture and what I call propaganda culture, because you don't, you know, it's not correct. I mean, Google is not always correct, right? So let's go a little bit into that now, so people can actually understand, you know, what it is that you guys do for those who don't really have it on their radar. So for the uninitiated, let's break down some words now that you've just corrected me, Ruhi.
I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to do this.
No, I love it. I love it. That due to pop culture have diffused meanings today, right? My goal here is to make it clear that what these words actually mean, so that it's clear to people and what the value is of your service, you know, that, you know, brings this to the table. So related to the entertainment business is kind of where you guys are, you know, working, but let's just kind of talk about it in a context that makes sense for everyone to understand. So diversity is the first word. Who wants to kind of tackle that one? What does diversity actually mean?
I feel like Sandhya has a great thing. She has to do it.
Do it, girlfriend.
This is for diversity.
Oh, I've lost you for a second, Sandhya.
Yeah, Sandhya, we can't hear you.
I'll sneak in a quick drink.
Yeah, I need to drink something too.
Oh my goodness. Can you hear me now?
Sneak it in.
Yeah, sneak it in. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
My husband turned on his AirPods, and so it like kicked over to him. That's why.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay.
So basically, I asked you about diversity. So you're going to tell us what that word means. Okay.
Yeah. So I have actually, as Ruhi has said, a little great way to remember the difference between diversity, equity, inclusion, and actually representation as well. Okay. So diversity is when everybody feels that they're invited to the party. Equity means that everybody is has equal access to getting to the party. So even if they live further away, if they don't have a car, if they have to take the subway, if they don't have like the $15 for the Uber, we find a way to make sure that everybody has access, equal access, equity to that opportunity. Inclusion means everyone is asked to dance. So it doesn't matter if you have 3 legs, if you have 1 leg, if you can't dance at all. A lot of people can't dance and they still do it anyway. So, you know, that's all right. They're all included to dance. And then representation means that everyone is asked, hey, what would you like to listen to? What kind of music do you want to dance to right now? So, you know, if you imagine life as a party, and who doesn't want to imagine life as a party, especially right now?
Right.
We want to make sure that we invite the whole spectrum of humanity to the party. And so I'm going to throw 2 more terms at you that we have to also introduce to the conversation. Okay. BIPOC.
Yes.
And LGBTQIA+. So what that means is that there are 2 types of underrepresented communities. BIPOC is Black, Indigenous, people of color, and people of color, BIPOC. And then LGBTQIA+ just covers the entire spectrum of sexuality and gender that we know is a fluid construct in our society today.
Right.
You can also add people who are differently abled to this mix. So basically what we're trying to do is say that humanity is a tapestry represented by all of these diverse components. How do we invite them to the party? How do we make sure they can all get to the party? How do we make sure everybody has an opportunity to dance? And how do we make sure that we get to hear everybody's music? Because that's what makes life worth living, right?
Right. So let me ask you something. How do you guys do that?
So what we do is Ruhi and I, having been in this cultural space, especially in New York City for the last 20 plus years, we're so lucky to have access to people in all of those communities just through our own lived experiences. And we also have partnerships with other people in the business, whether it's media entertainment or education, it's nonprofits, it's business. And we're able to say to them, look, we have a project that we're working on, and one of the characters happens to be someone who is differently abled. Would you be willing to come and talk to us about some of these questions that our client has, just to make sure that you're comfortable with how this is represented? Or even if you can't provide us any possible solutions, at least let us talk through some challenges that can surface while producing a show or a narrative with a character of this caliber, right?
Right.
We just want to make sure that we're not caught off guard. We want to make sure our clients are not caught off guard.
Absolutely. So this brings me to a question that I'm dying to ask you now. Ruhi, you take this one on. Why is it important to incorporate these now into human infrastructure? It's been missing since the beginning of time. Why now?
Well, I mean, these communities have always been marginalized. I think that's the biggest thing. I think that we're finally creating equity for these communities. You know, I think the Black community especially has been marginalized for centuries, you know, so it's time. So I think that's why now, you know, and it's the right thing to do. You know,
Absolutely.
It's morally right. So I think that's it in a nutshell for me. It's always been the right thing to do. And it's, I think we've been marginalized like so many different communities. And I feel like that it needs to happen.
Absolutely.
And, you know,
please go ahead, Sandhya. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on Ruhi's comments, not only is it the right thing to do, but it makes extreme business sense. Why would you limit your audience to one sector of wealthy people when you can access the entire sector of paying customers and clients, right? We know from Wakanda, we know from Star Wars, we know from Coco that movies that star and portray people across the diversity spectrum do really, really well. I mean, Slumdog, you know?
I mean,
yes.
Yeah. Talk about like the most marginalized of communities, right? I mean,
absolutely.
You are like making millions and millions of dollars. So just from a business perspective, it makes sense to widen your audience so that you can access that many clients. And I'll tell you, if your audience likes what they're hearing, they will come back for more. That's how you build your brand. That's how you build your audience infinities.
Absolutely. And, you know, it just, what comes to mind with, you know, a lot of what you guys are talking about and just how, you know, why has this not always been the case, right? Which is a whole other, you know, subject matter. But what's coming to me right now as well is that, I mean, there was a time when media was controlled by the few, and we were told what we were supposed to think, feel, love, hate, etc. Now we have a platform where everybody is a media company. Everybody gets to say who they are, why they are, and why they matter. And I feel that has massively changed the trajectory of where society is headed, where it should have always been. But it's finally headed in that direction, but people are still not quite getting it. So what I want to do at this point in our conversation is I want to ask you guys, do you have examples for people who just don't get this? Like examples of how people have done it badly versus how it's been done right? Like, is there anything that you can add to it? So, because some people are visual, they need to kind of understand context.
Yeah. And, you know, we don't want to call out anybody for having tried their best. We know that people make mistakes. And I think part of this situation that we're in right now is that there's been so much that has churned up, especially with the murders of George Floyd and others this summer.
Absolutely.
Everyone, and everyone wants to do better. We know that. We assume good intent on everyone's part, and we also extend grace to everybody to allow people to make mistakes, because that's how you learn. As my 5-year-old daughter says, mistakes are how you learn. So, you know, she's teaching me every day.
Absolutely.
So, you know, an example, of course, of where they've done well is, as I said before, Coco. They had people from those communities, from those cultures in the room, even at the writing stage. So in the development stage, and they carried them through all the way through set design and production. And the result was a movie that was embraced by the community, and therefore, having received their blessing, embraced by the world, literally at large, right? An example of where there is still room for improvement is if any of your audience watches Glow, Golden Ladies of Wrestling, which of course now unfortunately has been canceled. It's kind of hard to film wrestling, I guess, in the current environment.
Understood.
Right. Sunitha Mani, who is one of the actors on the show, she, as well as the other actors, did pen a letter that she's posted on her Instagram that's, you know, calls for executive producers of color, cultural producers, in the room to ensure that these storylines are more nuanced. And there's no reason why an actor, I mean, yes, everyone should advocate for themselves, but there's no reason why an actor should be alone in advocating for that. There needs to be representation across the entire process, and that's where we come in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know, go ahead.
The places where they do badly, I mean, like, it's definitely every Muslim terrorist porn that you've watched. You know, like I call it like Muslim terrorist porn, you know, because like that's all it is.
Yeah.
There's no dimension to the Muslim characters when they're terrorists. And, you know, there's countless of them out there. So many. I don't even need to name them all. Everybody has seen one, you know, and so, I mean, I think that like just recently, I've been reading a lot more scripts where they're asking, oh, we want our Muslim characters to be more three-dimensional. And I would have to give them feedback being like, well, if you want it to be three-dimensional, you're not there yet. You keep working. Keep working on that, and maybe we'll get there. So that's the, you know, where
that's a big one. That's a big one where they get it wrong. Yeah.
It's a big one, and I know everyone can visualize what I'm talking about when I say that, you know.
Absolutely. So, but, you know, this kind of begs the question, just because, you know, I am an out and outright feminist. I have to ask you about the gender part of all this. Talk to me about that.
What exactly about the gender part?
So, you know, people are still not quite understanding the nuances and the dynamics that are culturally different from one type of woman to another, right? We're still being kind of put in the, you know, brown women are put into kind of the box where they're controlled. That story's still there, right? It's still there.
Yeah. So like, exactly. My sister and I have been fighting against this forever. You know, as a Muslim woman, there is a certain way that you're supposed to be and act, and it's just not necessarily true. There's so many more stories. So yes, if you're talking about certain types of women, there's definitely ways they think that you need to be, and we definitely think that we should be fighting outside of that box of that. And I mean,
and that's a hard one, Ruby, though, right?
Yeah, because it really is.
Because, you know, it seems to be a little bit easier to kind of understand the concept that, okay, what do we need to do to be authentic in this culture? That seems to kind of be more palatable to understand, because you go to the, you know, the people in that culture and you ask them the questions. Right. When it comes to women, well, there's so much gray area there. Right, please, you're dying to speak. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, you know, it is interesting. I mean, again, just speaking in the South Asian culture for a moment, we know for a fact that the pantheon of at least Hindu gods is made up of both female and male devas and devis, and that the women often have more power than the men. I mean, think of Durga Mahisha Mardani, you know, she was the only one that could defeat the demon, the buffalo demon, and she harnessed the power of all of the gods, and she was the only one that could hold it herself to vanquish him.
Absolutely. Or you're giving me chills right now.
I mean, world domination is our motto, so, you know. Or you look at Shakuntala, right? So
Mhm.
there's some Ardhanarishwari who was half female, half male, or
Yeah.
even in the Mahabharata, there were female warriors because they were the only ones that were able to defeat enemies. So our own history, if we
Mhm.
go back before colonization, our own
Yeah.
history is full of examples of strong, powerful, fierce, loving, kind women, mother
Mhm.
figures, as well as warriors, as well as
Mhm.
preservers and creators. I mean, we as women, we are creators of life. That alone gives us a power that nobody else
Absolutely.
has.
Absolutely. Amen, sister.
Like, yes.
Yes. And so, I think there is something to be said about looking within our own stories and saying like,
Mhm.
okay, yes, you're right. Like we can have like this story of this woman who is having to act a certain way, or hey, maybe we'll produce a story that is about Durga Mahishasura Mardini or a modern day Shakuntala who has to like
Mhm.
fight for herself and to do it. And that will happen. We're going to make sure that those happen.
Amen. And I know you guys focus right now is more predominantly, Hollywood and kind of that industry, which has been, really predicated on propaganda and tokenism since the beginning. But it's quite the task to take on. Talk to us a little bit about, for those producers, writers out there who, may be listening in on this or watching this. What would you say to them to help them kind of understand how to navigate all of this? Because one thing that you said at the beginning is, you can't blame them for what they don't know.
Right.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, to navigate all this is you just have to keep learning. You have to be open. I think
Mhm.
that you have to be open to dialogue and open to different ideas. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I feel like you got to come out here with an open mind and you have to be able to do the work. It's work to change your mindset. It really is.
Mhm.
I feel like I
Yes.
do work all the time. I learned so much this year. I'm still growing as a person. And, I feel like I'm very old. I'm still learning. But I mean, for
I
us,
love
I
that you
think
think you're old, lady. Oh
I
my
do. I
God.
know. I feel like I'm an old lady,
Like respective to what? Like everything is relative, right?
right? To my
It's
kids,
so
I am
true.
so old. To my children, they're like, "You are so old, mommy."
I get that from mine too. I get it.
But yeah, I just think the biggest thing for those writers and directors out there is also just like I feel like you just have to right now because we have so much time. Just watch and everything you can, read everything you can. Like there's so much
Mhm.
time now that you could really absorb everything out there, and so just try to expand your mind in different ways.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you're saying that because with kind of the standing still of humanity on certain levels this year, there's been a massive growth in collective consciousness. There's been a massive growth in, the need, the desire, the calling to know ourselves better as humanity, right?
Right, right,
Totally.
totally,
And
Totally.
completely.
I don't know if you guys are, believers in this, but I am. I fully believe that, you know, the spiritual, the astrological, numerology, I believe all of these things that are almost like sciences that people aren't taught, therefore they think they think that they're not really relevant in their lives. I feel that those missing arts, those missing sciences from centuries of understanding humanity, so therefore we've kind of been
Totally.
in this dark period
Mhm.
for a couple of thousand years, is starting to now turn around with this age of Aquarius, this age of the divine feminine, finally standing up and taking
Yes,
our rightful place
right.
in the story of humanity, because the narrative has always been male. The
Yes.
infrastructure that we've
Yes.
created has been
Mhm.
male centric,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
it's going to be people like you guys, like me, and others like us that work collectively together to be authentic to the narrative of the human experience. And I think that's what it is at
Yeah,
the end of the
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
that we're talking about, right?
It's
completely
about
agree.
it's
Yeah.
it's about staying curious. you know, like ask questions. Even if you don't know how to find the answer, just keep asking the question until somebody can point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we're supposed to be in the Kali Yuga right now. I hope that's not true. I don't believe it. I think that, like you said, you, especially Raj, are doing your part to lift everyone's consciousness by providing information and access to information. So thank you so much for doing that. And yeah, just stay curious, ask questions. If something doesn't seem right, ask why, and ask yourself, ask your friends, ask your community, and try to figure it out together, you know?
Absolutely. Ruhi, do you
And I
want to
think
add to that?
I also think that, like, if you're in a place where you can put a woman or a minority group into power, or like for me, I feel like my sister and I, we always put women behind the camera on the editing side. Who we hired, it was women. That's who we want to lift up, you know? So
Right.
I feel like if you're in a place in your life, like really think about that and be like, you know what, I want to help my fellow woman out, or, you know, whatever the case may be.
So this brings me to something that's a little bit off topic, but, you know, as two strong women, as two educated, strong women who are constantly, you know, looking at life and looking at what's going on out there, I got to ask you this. We have Kamala Harris in the position that she's in.
Yes.
You got to talk. I just need a comment. I need a comment from both of you. Like, what does this mean, especially with you guys in your wheelhouse? Like, what does this mean?
It's everything. It's everything. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys. I mean, we all just lost it, right? We all just cried buckets. And the fact that she is at that position, and what she said, you know, that I'll be the first, but I won't be the last. And it is everything, because it means that that our parents' sacrifice was not for nothing.
It was not in vain.
It was not in vain. The things that we've seen our parents and our grandparents have to do to sacrifice for us, and the sacrifices that we are making to hold the door open for the women coming up behind us, or for the BIPOC coming up behind us, it's worth it, and it works, and it's working.
Ruhi?
For me, so for me, I felt like, I mean, it was everything. And also watching it with my daughter was just amazing. It was like, I mean, it was everything to me to watch it with my daughter, to know that she will never have to think, well, can there be a president, a woman president? I mean, like, I think that, you know, we have to thank Hillary Clinton, and we have to thank Stacey Abrams. We thank the women who helped other women open that door for her. You know, like, that's the thing. We always have to lift each other up, because that's how, you know, that's how this world will become better, I think.
Absolutely. And this kind of brings back the whole kind of emphasis for me that we truly are in the time of the divine feminine. We truly are finally getting to, you know, be in the positions that we are worthy for. We are worthy for this. It's like, it's almost like it's been so much time in the coming for us, you know, in this journey. When we look at our ancestors, we look at the women, you know, throughout history, and the things that we've had to go through. Like, I still can't believe the position that Kamala's in. I still, like, because everything about what I did when I started my company all those years ago was because we just weren't being recognized. We just weren't being represented. We just weren't getting, like, we weren't getting the recognition. And, like, you know, we had to create our own platforms, because platforms that existed out there wanted to tell their version of our story. And that was not good enough for me. You know what I mean? It wasn't good enough.
Absolutely.
So that this kind of brings me to something I got to ask you guys. Like, I know you guys focus is, you know, on Hollywood, and I understand why that is, but let's take a look right now at Bollywood. I mean, everything in Bollywood is amplified to the nth degree, right? On every level. So if there's going to be something that is inappropriate, right?
It's there.
So,
I've worked on so many of those films.
You have, you know. So
I know.
The opportunity there is huge. So why is that not a focus for you guys? Talk to me a little bit.
It is not that it's not a focus. It's just that we're trying to, you know, sitting in New York, we're just working our way out. And so we're working with people who are at least in a closer time zone for now.
But if somebody came along, like if there was,
yes.
Okay, that's what I needed to hear. So everyone
Yes.
out there who are doing all of these like streaming movies, streaming series, I mean, you know, streaming means that anyone in the world can have access to this, which means that, you know, you guys as cultural producers are even more relevant and needed and necessary on the global, you know, arena, not just in Hollywood. So you are open to this, right? Like you guys are open to this.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you for Bollywood especially, to have a project that can serve both an Asian audience and a Western facing audience, the translation in that is sometimes can be unclear, uncomfortable, messy. And so that is exactly where our talents would come in, where it's like, if there is a production happening, that's a Bollywood production, but their audience is not just local, but it's global, then we can come in and say, okay, I understand why you're doing this, and this might play here, but it's actually going to make your character unsympathetic to your global audience. So can we make a suggestion, or we just want to surface that challenge for you so that you can think about how to do this a little differently.
Right.
I mean, like, I feel like Netflix India is right in our wheelhouse. Like they can definitely use our, you know, so I feel like, you know, that's the client that we can serve as well for Bollywood as well as Hollywood. So that's definitely,
So let me
definitely like,
yes, absolutely. So let me ask you this. Any tips within your wheelhouse at SRC Partners on how to be appropriate, in quotes, when it comes to a lot of the intense inappropriateness out there? Basically what I mean by that, so I can be, because this could be like an entire conversation all by itself. There are so many injustices that have rightfully so gotten global traction this year. Right. For example, and this is just a few examples, Black Lives Matter took center stage, being the right ally to the Black brothers and sisters of ours as South Asians has been widely discussed, right? Knowing how to navigate yourself as a person who is, in quotes again, white, the white privilege, you know, that's also, you know, come under target as well. What are your guys' thoughts? Like, what comments do you have regarding all of that that's been going on this year, and how it kind of translates into, from my perspective, how even more important it is that you guys exist?
Do you want to take that one, Ruhi, or I can start?
You could start.
Okay. So what I would say is that it's really important for everyone to recognize that we all hold a certain amount of privilege. And we all have experienced a certain amount of prejudice or discrimination or, you know, unhappy events. And for especially maybe South Asians, those two go very hand in hand, right? On one hand, we come hopefully from very good socioeconomic backgrounds. Our parents have sacrificed for education in order to make sure that we can move forward. And because of that, they've also unfortunately instilled some prejudices in us. And we have, and we are and this is again, a very generalized comment about our communities, but generally speaking, we tend to be in positions of privilege when it comes to education and socioeconomic status. And
especially so it's in America.
Especially in America.
Yeah.
And we see now that so many Fortune 500 companies, I mean, Google, for example, they all have Indian men at the top of these companies. Microsoft, Indra Nooyi running Pepsi for so long, you know, so these are people that have worked their tukuses off to get up there, right? And they are doing what they can to bring other people up behind them. But you don't have to be the CEO of Microsoft to do that. Even us in our own communities holding the doors open for people behind us, people who are less fortunate than us, not South Asian, but recognizing that people who are just not white are going to have some disadvantages that we can help with. That's huge. Just raising that kind of awareness, you know, to maybe contribute to a children's theater company, for example, here in Brooklyn, that Ruhi's on the board of. You know, they work with underrepresented communities. Just something as simple as that, where you can actually have fun doing it. It doesn't have to be like drudgery, you know. So that's what it is that we all have to recognize our own privilege. However minuscule it may be in comparison to some, it's actually really great in comparison to others. And it's those others that we want to help lift up with our privilege.
Yeah, because everything in life is relative, right? And that's a really great point that you made. Is there anything you want to add to that at all, Rui?
I mean, I think I think you were saying that like in the global way, I think for the Black Lives Matter, we know that they were the most marginalized. And like, yes, we had our issues as South Asians, but you know, this is their moment because they have been the most marginalized, and we really have to recognize that. And
well, you know,
use our
really
own.
On that point, I have to just step in there. I mean, yeah, it's funny because I was being interviewed by a company, and they said, but you know, like, you know, what is this big fuss that, you know, Black people always have? And you know, it just made me stand still for a second. And, you know, other than the fact of the ignorance component of it, is that it's the only race that was ever brought into America in shackles. It's the only race. That in and by itself.
Right.
That in and by itself is the point here.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, like, as a brown person, yes, like we were targeted after 9/11. But, you know, I feel like it's just not the centuries that they have had in America. You know, they were brought here against their will, you know, and it's just, you know, I had some fear after 9/11 about police officers targeting me as a brown person, but they've lived with it for hundreds of years. You know, they're literally getting killed in the streets right now. And it's just, you know, it's really bad. And so we, as you know, all of us as a community has to really relook at how we think and really use our privilege to like be, you know, to help others that are really marginalized like that.
Absolutely. I was dying to do that cough. Okay, so in the workforce right now, statistically speaking, 75% of it are millennials and younger. And they are demanding social responsibility in the work environment. This is a huge opportunity for you guys too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There, I mean, we've seen this with climate change, even in our own generation, you know, and now again with social justice, people vote with their dollars. And nobody wants to work at a company where they're producing a product or a service that is harming individuals or harming the environment. And so this, I feel so proud of this fact, right? That we're all coming together and we're all saying, yes, 75% of the workforce may be millennials, but 100% of the workforce is actually asking for this, right? That we all want to be, we all want to believe that what we're doing is for good. You know, almost nobody wants to contribute to evil. So
I would have to.
So
I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
Ruhi, we've seen some of those, haven't we? We've seen some of those.
Yes.
That perpetuate the dark side. So
exactly. And I think that that's where, again, knowing that there is a question that needs to be raised, even if you don't know the answer to it, just saying, hang on a second, this seems a little weird to me. Let's get someone in here to do the sense check for us, right? Like, I think it's weird. You don't think it's weird. Let's just make sure that we both don't think it's weird, right? And so that's where we can come in and say, yeah, I see your point. Or, yeah, but you know, this is why it's okay, kind of thing. So it's, again, it's just getting that external third party sense check, which is what we can provide at the bare minimum for a piece of communication, work, branding, marketing, commercials, media, entertainment, et cetera, anything that's client facing. Because here's the other thing too about these types of communications. Those are one way with your client. If you're doing an internal communication with your employees, you have feedback, you have employee resource groups, people have conversations. If you're just putting a piece of marketing or a product out there, an entertainment product out there, you're not going to hear about it until the public hears about it. So it's far better to have that information in hand before you go wide with something and lose your investment on a movie that you've spent millions of dollars with.
Right. I want to ask you one more question before we, close things off. And that is, when you're in a room with producers or writers or whoever the stakeholders are, and they just don't get it. Like how, but they have to get it because they're, say, for example, the financiers expect them to get it.
Right.
That's
right.
a big gap. Talk to me here. How do you handle that? You know, because I mean, oh,
it is frustrating. It's
Yeah.
definitely frustrating. I think that you know, like I mentioned Rahana, my sister, who's a playwright and screenwriter, like, and that's just, and you when
Yes.
you're in a room and you're just kind of like banging your head and they don't understand. You know, I just think that again, that's why they need us. I think we
Of
can
course.
make them understand. I feel like you have to have a lot of discussion and really, really show them facts and research, and then you start, and then even numbers and dollars and your bottom line. That's when people start to really understand, when they're just like, oh, this is going to affect my bottom line.
Yes.
Then, you know, I think that's the big thing. I think that's where people they start to listen a little bit. And I think that when, you know, I think that Gitesh and I, being in the PR side, we've become experts in what we talk about. So I feel like people do listen for the most part. I don't know if they sometimes don't get it, but like I feel like as much as you give them the information, at least you're doing your job and getting that out there to them.
Right.
So
and that's the key, right?
It really is the key. So,
yeah. And I think that's the only thing we can do at the end of the day, is to just surface the challenges, provide information as to why those choices may not be ideal, examples as to where it's gone wrong before, and examples of where it's gone right, and just say, you know, at the end of the day, we don't think this is going to be in line with success, and of course our interests are aligned, and we don't think this piece is going to be successful. But ultimately, it's the client's decision what to take forward. At this point, yeah, I mean, at this point, you have people like Kristen Bell, Hank Azaria, who've refused to voice, you know, characters that are BIPOC or LGBTQIA+. I mean, there's an awareness out there that we can point to as cultural producers and say, look, this is not just us saying it, but we can actually point to many examples of where people agree with what we're suggesting. But you know, on you got to do what you got to do at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And for those people who are just kind of tuning in right now as we get ready to close off, can you guys, you know, just kind of re-articulate the repertoire of your services for them so they understand?
Yep. So as cultural producers, we come in to ensure that your DEI plan is carried through from conception to development, pre-production, production, post-production, including editing and cleanup, and marketing. And we make sure that you are able to access an entire audience that is built of BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, differently abled, etc. Because the wider your audience is, the wider the return on your investment will be.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I just wanted to add also, SRC is like, we're looking into also producing our own work with, you know, women and putting people in empowerment positions.
I love that. I so need to be a part of that.
You do. I'm like
discussion.
Canadian. Yeah, I'm Canadian, so I want to start producing in Canada. So
let's do it. Let's do it.
Do it, Raj.
Yes, let's do it.
But you know, I think that like that's the way forward for us as well. We want to do things under our own umbrella that we are proud of, and that we want to uplift others. So that's the big thing. So if anybody has, you know, ideas or want to like get in contact with us, you know, we're all open. We want to hear from you. You know, I think that you could check us out at our website, srcpartners.com. You know, we have each of our emails there, you know, so I think that reach out to us. We definitely want to talk to anyone and everyone.
That's amazing. And any final thoughts that you'd like to close off with, guys? Anything that you feel that people need to know that maybe we didn't touch upon, or anything you want to re-emphasize at all?
For my part, I would just like to say, first of all, thank you, Raj, for having us and for having this important conversation, and for yourself being such a champion of women and the divine feminine.
Yes.
And also for your viewers to just remember to stay curious, ask questions, give yourselves grace for making mistakes, and give others grace for making mistakes as well, because that's how we all learn.
Yes.
And I guess, I want to reiterate, thank you so much, Raj. This was really fun. We had a great time, and
Yes.
you're amazing.
So are you guys. We could talk forever. We could.
We could talk forever. It's amazing. This has been so fun. And I guess I just want to, make sure that people, if you're out there embarking on a culturally sensitive topic or project, really, get some cultural producers on your team. I think that it's really worthwhile to do that, and and it's important to do that. So
absolutely. And folks, if you are, just joining us, I just want to mention again that we are speaking to Rohi and Sandhya from SRC Partners. And although their focus in terms of what they do is Hollywood productions, they are also open to discussions for any projects that are from Bollywood or any other industries. They're also open to the conversation of talking about it from a corporate social responsibility perspective as well. So just hit them up. Again, ladies, your website is?
SRC-partners.com.
Thank you so much, guys. I mean, you guys are
Thank
just a
you.
wealth of wisdom. I mean, you guys are needed. You're actually needed in every single industry, in the infrastructure, for us to be able to, have a very cohesive, holistic, beautiful experience as humans moving forward. Thank you so much. I adore both of you, and I cannot wait till the next time we have more conversations, because this just gets me excited, talking to incredible women doing incredible things that is very service oriented, where it's about humanity. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Raj.
Thank you. See you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.